I've seen this before in photos, but seeing it in person is just all the more laughable. Alright folks, it's time to get into some more discourse once again because Red Hood is going to be the subject of discussion one more time with a very hilarious outcome here that we've seen in promo pics and lead-ups to the release of this figure, and finally it is in my possession. It is Red Hood from the Gotham Knights McFarlane Toyland. So Gotham Knights, which is now officially set to be released on October 25th, 2022. And personally, between the two Batman-centric video games that aren't really centered on Batman coming out, Gotham Knights frankly is the one that I was probably the least interested in until Suicide Squad is reportedly delayed. So it looks like full marketing for Gotham Knights is in full force with new figures, and one of them is Red Hood here. And here's the thing, is that amongst the four, this is the only one that kind of stood above the rest to make me go, okay, if I ever do pull the trigger on a McFarlane toy for the Gotham Knights line, it would be Red Hood, because the rest just did not appeal to me. They didn't look all that great. They looked kind of just meh. They just rushed into production. Red Hood is the only one that I felt like had a little bit of production behind it. And after toying with him some bit, that's for the most part true, except for one laughable feature that we'll get to momentarily. For now, I would say aesthetically, he's not too bad looking. Of course, this design is just a little something to acquire over time because Red Hood, we're so used to him having, of course, the iconic red mask, as well as some form of a leather jacket or just some kind of attire that kind of resembles his persona. Never really thought of myself that a hoodie with the sleeves cut out and the symbol on the front, very showy as it is right here with all the tactical gear, as the game's gonna put heavy emphasis on is, of course, the tactical approach to how you tackle some of these different missions with the rest of your team. It looks like this design of Red Hood is catering to that. It's very marketed towards that approach of the gameplay from what we've seen so far. Along with that, we're likely going to be expecting a teen rating, that way it's accessible to everybody, and because of that, Red Hood can't be full-on Red Hood, and therefore, despite the iconic mask, which he looks for the most part pretty good, I personally feel like he resembles Deadpool more than anything else rather than Red Hood directly, because we've seen Red Hood before, and this design has come across a couple of times, but maybe it's just the wide appeal, like I said about the video game that they're trying to achieve with its widespread kind of angle. But there's just something about the eyes being so small and punctured so much with that white indentation in the middle that I don't know what it is. It just looks more like Deadpool than it does Red Hood. I feel like the Three Jokers Red Hood looks more like Red Hood, or any other version, even the Arkham Knight, because you got the big red dome on his head. You can actually legitimately see that that is Red Hood. Here, I just feel like it's Deadpool wearing a hoodie, or at least a very yoked Deadpool with some cake behind him. But otherwise, I would say the sculpting for the head itself is, however, done rather well as the rest of the figure overall. He's very tanky. He's definitely going to be the tankier character out of the bunch in that game, and it comes across fairly well in figure form. You can see how predominant the sculpting around the chest and torso area, as well as the back. You can see that an awful lot of padding and strapping and things going on. I do like the symbol on the front. I do like the much thicker and much more aggressive nature to the bat symbol that he embroidered there on the front of his hoodie. I just think that Red Hood is generally a character that tries to disassociate himself from Batman, so I'm expecting some kind of connection within Gotham Knights to have him don this symbol on his chest after the events that happened at the beginning of that game, from what we're led to believe in that trailer. The rest of the design and the proportions follow suit here in figure form. Like I said, it's done very well as far as sculpting and as far as detailing. I do, however, see from the naked eye a little bit of that texturing differentiation going on around the figure, where you can see how the hoodie and the torso piece is a little bit more matted than the legs are a little glistening. I always get just a little apprehensive whenever I see that in my figures, because I feel like two different companies or even more potentially worked on the figure, and that could potentially lead to some schizophrenic results. You can even see a little bit more of that matted finish going on right here on the cake side of the figure itself, then leading on to the legs, so we can see a little bit more of that glistening coming through. But overall, the sculpting is actually done fairly nice, regardless of what you think of the design. Like I said, I know that this design is not going to gel with everybody. I like it, but I don't love it. For the context of where this character comes from, or at least the exact property, I can see it working. It makes sense. So as far as sculpting and detailing, I could see it fairly coming through here in figure form. Of course, personally, I don't like that he's wearing a hoodie, but they did with what they could here in figure form, kind of sculpting out the hoodie there at the top, along with the little threads kind of bleeding here from the collar piece. They are at risk, however, to be ripped off because this is made out of this really flimsy, well, I don't want to say flimsy, but very, very thin rubber because of how loose it is off the figure. This, in the wrong hands, has the potential to be ripped off. It's very, very delicate, so please be careful if you do come in possession of this figure. I guess my only real criticism would be just the way that everything is kind of slanted from the side angle point of view. As you can see, he's leaning a little too much to the front and then taking out that junk in the back, as I kind of keep referring to, but there's a reason. The reason is because this is probably my only little problem with the figure, is just how really anchored they made the figure be, not just from the ass side, but also even from the legs. You can kind of see how the legs are kind of straight out here around the thigh area, but then as we navigate towards the calf section of the leg, it kind of anchors more towards the back end like that, so it's almost like he's very front facing, puffing out the chest or so, and putting him in this position was honestly the best way that I can get him to stand on his own without the need of the base. So the positioning problem as far as a very clear standing pose is still prevalent here for McFarlane figures amongst the Gotham Knights line, as you can see, but at least it makes for an intimidating look here from Red Hood. Now, if we do want to get him into other poses, we're obviously going to have to mess around with the articulation, and for the most part, it's doing pretty well, except again, a little bit of that paranoia about multiple companies working on this figure kind of comes back a little bit during articulation, beyond the textures that I've commented on already. So we start off with the head, and it's still doing a pretty good job at rotating the full 360 degrees, as you see right there. It does pivot very generously, going up as well as left and right, not so much on the incline or crunching motion. I feel like it could have looked down a little better than it's actually given to us right there, so that could have been a little bit more welcome. Then we get to the shoulders. This is where a little bit of that paranoia of the multiple teams working on this figure kind of comes back a little bit, because my Red Hood came with some rather loose shoulder joints. They're not terribly problematic, but you can see just how loose they are on the vertical rotation side of things, where doing the full 360 is a little too easy, to where you can only do it with one finger. You don't really have to grab the entire arm. You can just fully rotate it like that with complete ease. The left arm is a little bit on the tighter side, so you can at least have that there, at least for mine here. Once we get to extension, it's also a little too difficult. So on the other side of the spectrum, vertical is a little too loose. Extension towards the sides is a little too hard, to the point where a couple of times, it hasn't happened yet during this review, but a couple of times prior to shooting this joint right here completely came off and disconnected the whole entire arm. It just came apart. And of course, it's a ball joint, you can easily pop it back in, but just the fact that that's happening altogether is a little concerning. But that shoulder piece, that extra shoulder piece that McFarlane often throws with the shoulder joints here in their figures, is probably one of the best ones I've seen in a while. Despite how opposite sides of the spectrum we are on the vertical and the extension, that extra shoulder section right here to allow that shrugging motion and then being able to flex the shoulders inwards and outwards and almost all the way around. This is the first time where other figures I've seen the shoulder joint be a little bit more locked on certain axes of the overall dimension of the figure. This is one of the few where that shoulder joint almost allows a full ball rotation the way a regular real life shoulder joint would do. So I was actually really appreciative of how flexible this shoulder joint really is, to where you can have it be a little bit more intimidating, or he can be slouching his shoulders and relaxing them a little bit more. This is one of the more versatile ones that I've seen in some time. I'm looking forward to seeing how many more figures are able to kind of take a page of notes off of this one right here, because this is one of the more remarkable ones. Then we get to bicep. Again, having this shoulder joint be a little bit loose means that you practically have to grab the entire thing if you want to get the bicep swivel to actually move, but it is doable right about right there. And then of course, both elbows sport two joints to allow for full flexing of the elbow all the way in. It is a little heavily ratcheted on mine there, but it is doable. And as you can see, a little bit of the joint parts away right there, so do be careful with these joints right here, but they are rather sturdy and a little too sturdy and durable because I just got pinched. And the wrists once more do allow the hand to rotate 360 degrees as well as incline inwards and outwards. It's a little finicky of where it goes because this is one of the more durable wrist joints that I've tackled with thus far, and there's a reason for that once we get to the accessories as to how I discovered how finicky those wrist joints on this particular figure really ended up being. Once we get to torso is where things get a little complicated. There's unfortunately not real much of any waist articulation going on right there, as it's become a little bit more rare these days with McFarlane's, so ever so often you might get a little lucky and come across a figure with waist articulation, but the torso joint is still found there. It's just that because, like I mentioned before, of how bulky and tanky they sculpted out his torso to be, that torso joint is a little too much on the stiff side. It is movable, but you can already audibly hear just how resisted that joint really is because of just how stacked he really is, along with that thickness going on there in the trunk. That because of that wrist joint, it does move left or right, but there's almost virtually no way I'm going to be able to get it to rotate the full 360 like I've done with other figures. So that's going to be met with heavy resistance right about right there. And not much in the way of crunching. I tried to see if I could crunch the abs, and you can only get a slight nudge, as you see right there, in almost every direction, left or right, up and down. There's virtually none of that found here because of just how stacked, like I said, they made that overall torso joint. So full horizontal movement is allowed, but not the full 360 and not in any other capacity whatsoever. So this is actually, as impressed as I was with the shoulder joints, not so much with the torso. Once we get to legs, it becomes a bit more traditional, except he does have a slant as you move the legs upwards. So I was thinking maybe he's gonna have a vehicle in the future, because generally when you see legs for a McFarlane figure do this, kind of slant in a off direction towards the sides, that usually means that figure is intended to ride some form of vehicle. So far, hasn't really been announced, but you can rotate the legs about that much forward and then only about that much back before it kind of conflicts with the thickness back there. And then you can, of course, extend them towards the sides, and they're slightly ratcheted. They're not as ratcheted as I was hoping for them to be, like other McFarlane's most recently, but they can extend only about that far. And I don't know if it's something with the joints on mine, but there's slight swivelness going on right there. Nothing found in any kind of thigh cuts here, which is funny because this strap kind of makes it seem like there's going to be. But in terms of legitimate swivel movement, there's not really much found there except for just that slight inching on the left, but I feel like that's a manufacturing thing. Then we get to the knees, which are thoroughly cut out right there with two joints, as you see right about right there. That could allow full bending all the way up, as you see before you right there. So that is flexible there, like traditional McFarlane's tend to be with the knee joints. However, mine came with super ratchetiness found here in the joint, so do be careful when pressing them, but it feels sturdy. It feels very, very clean and sturdy. It doesn't feel like it's stuck or I need to take a blow dryer to it. No, it actually feels like it's part of the figure. Then we get to an impressive collection here of ankle joints, because not only do we have the ball joint that allows the full horizontal 360 movement right there, but there's heavy ratchetiness when you pivot the ankles up and down, as you see right there. And without having to rotate the ankles, you can actually pivot them left and right without needing to like bend them forward or flexing them up or having to do any kind of like inclination or thing like I've seen other McFarlane's do, where I can simply just take them and pivot them slightly. It's not the full pivot. It's not like it allows full bending or breakage at the ankles like in a basketball game or whatever, but it is a little bit more flexible than I've seen in other recent McFarlane's be. And then of course you cannot forget the toesies, which are probably some of the smaller toesies I've seen in recent McFarlane's, but the joint is nevertheless still found there. So overall, pretty doable articulation for a variety of poses. Of course, again, a little bit of that ratchetiness, as well as the way that he's just overall stacked up with his tanky physique, could cause for some top heaviness that you're really going to have to finesse a little bit with that posability. And posing with Red Hood, you will do once we tackle the only pair of accessories he came with. And also probably the reason why you're watching this video, because obviously a point of conversation recently, as I've discovered, was how controversial and debatable some accessories or the lack of certain accessories were with certain McFarlanes that are generally accustomed to be seen with a particular firearm or weapon of choice, if you will. And if any of you know Red Hood, you know that he doesn't necessarily follow the same kinds of rules that Batman likes to follow. So because of that, you expect Red Hood to be sporting a couple of different partners by the sides of his holsters. Except this time, of course, Red Hood not only complying with that particular controversial stance that McFarlane was then told to inflict on or to act upon, but also the game as well being marketed to a much more wider demographic. He doesn't necessarily come with those accessories. Instead, he comes with a pair of pointy fingertips. How do we dance around this? Okay, they're finger guns. Okay, they're finger guns. Yes. Extra pair of hands molded to look like finger guns. Cause that's what we're doing now. And he's not the only one. I do know that the new Penguin figure for the new Batman movie, that McFarlane also comes with at least one finger gun. Because it was bad enough that Colin Farrell couldn't smoke on the set. Can't have his figure sport a gun either. Anyways. We've already kind of tackled this discussion most recently to a surprising turnout, but here Red Hood sports the finger guns, and it's one thing, it would have been one thing to just cut out that accessory altogether and be like, okay, fine, we're not going to have that with our Red Hood figures, we're not going to have that with other characters that are generally seen with that kind of accessory, but to then just swap it with finger guns, to be like, well, he can come with this just takes it into the realm of parody. All right, like this makes it worse. Like you might as well not have included anything, or at least give him a substitute accessory for that particular firearm. You could have had it be, I don't know, just something else, something from the game, or maybe McFarlane just doesn't have enough details on the game because it's likely gonna get delayed. I don't know, who knows? We'll see. But he comes with finger guns, and of course, to be able to have them on his person, all you really have to do is just give the hands a quick tug. Now, unfortunately, this would be a much more rudimentary thing. Jesus Christ, that thing just popped. But this would be a much simpler thing to do if these joints, these ball joints on his wrist, were not so stubborn. These are some of the toughest, most difficult hand accessories I've ever had the distinction of swapping in and out to get this accessory to actually work. Now, there is a really satisfying pop when you get it in there, but getting it in there is actually just half the battle, because Jesus, as you can see right there, I'm actually just struggling to put one of the hands in because I don't know if mine came with slightly oversized ball joints on the wrists here, but every single time I've had to swap these hands for this figure leading up to this review, it was just sure, look at this thing. There you go. Okay, I heard the pop. There you go. We got one in. We got one. That is one, thank God. But there's one. Now on to tackle the other, which by default, he comes with one hand that looks like it's designed to hold something else, whereas the other one is simply just a fist. So this one should be a little bit on the easier side to remove, since I have a much firmer grip on it. There we go. And there you have Red Hood with his pointy finger guns. Yep, that's what we're doing now. That is what we're doing. We can now have Red Hood dance across the street a la Bully Maguire and hit on all the girls doing so. Yeah, I mean, obviously, and here's the thing, this would probably work if maybe Red Hood himself was a bit more of a comedic character, but he's not. He's not. So at this point, like I said, I would have liked it better if maybe they either substituted it with a completely different accessory that at least just catered to the character, or better yet, just not have him have any accessories. Just let the figure stand on his own, or come with alternate hands to just have them be open, like 2 fist hands and then 2 open hands, like he came by default, instead of doing 1 open and 1 closed, and then these things. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I think we've already kind of tackled this point across rather well recently, that McFarlane's been doing some weird things as far as choice. Now, of course, not all of that choice is left up to him. You know, there is a license here, there is an agreement here, and he has to abide by it, you know, as a lot of us often do when it comes to the workplace. It's just that hopefully, as more of these concerns and these things, because we like our characters. We like our characters enough to want to have these figures. It's the only reason why we're, you know, more vocal about these kinds of controversies when they come out here in figure form. And because of that, I also want to make mine vocal amongst these reviews. And with that, I say enough with these really weird accessories. Either don't include them, or, you know, be a little bit more clever with negotiations as far as what can be and what cannot be included with certain characters. Unless, be right back. Okay, not exactly the greatest fit, and his trigger finger's not exactly inside of the trigger, but hey, look at that. Like, he actually looks the part now. Now, again, the little bit of slack I'll give this time around is knowing that this version of Red Hood is going to be a slightly pulled back version, considering the property that he's going to be coming from, which is likely going to be a teen-rated Gotham Knights video game. And because of that context, I can see him not sporting his traditional firearms, maybe not even having the much darker background that his character usually is born from. But finger guns is frankly where I draw the line. At least that makes for a very funny visual and thumbnail. But I would say going forward here, I just don't want to see this kind of thing becoming a plague on the McFarlane toy line, because as far as quality products and also the approach to some of these DC characters, I genuinely do like what McFarlane often does. And I know that there's plenty of more figures coming our way here in spring and the summertime, and I'm looking forward to some of them. But for the time being, I would say with certain characters that deal with this particular controversial issue, there's ways to navigate it. And I'm hoping that those discussions are taking place right now, so that then we don't have this problem in the future. So if you are going to be picking up this figure, which I do believe is becoming a bit more available in different Targets and Walmarts and hell, even Best Buys, I would say if you do happen to have a figure with some spare accessories that you can sport him with to make him a bit more true to character, like I do with either Flashpoint Batman or even that Arkham Asylum Joker, like some of you reminded me about in the comment section, I would say that's the way to go as far as displaying him. And if you guys want to pick up your own, be sure to use the affiliate links in the description below. They help with the channel quite a bit. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out this other McFarlane toy review showing up on screen right now. Let me know in the comments if you guys are planning on playing Gotham Knights, which is now set to release on October 25th. And as always, stay humble.